I have sometimes spoken other languages just to avoid speaking to people.
Just to get away from the situation.
Yeah. Me no speak no English. Low understand. No, low.
Oh, dear.
Low like.
Wow.
Oh.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Karina Curlewis, a Eurasian yoga instructor and artist based in Hong Kong. Born and raised in Hong Kong in a British-Filipino American-Hong Kong-Chinese household, Karina had to navigate the confusion that comes with her mixed identity from a young age. She joins us to talk about growing up in between cultures, code switching, and beauty standards in Asia. Hello. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. Now, on this podcast, we always feature stories of Asians from around the world whose identities cannot really be pinpointed just by the ways that they look or speak, or those who are always told they are either not Asian enough or too Asian. And today, our guest who will be joining us, she will be actually sharing her experience, and she will be able to tell you that she has experienced all of that I just talked about, no matter where she goes. So without further ado, let us bring in our guest for this episode, Karina.
Hi.
Welcome to Proudly Asian. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We're just chatting earlier, and I'm just saying how, actually, Karina, for those who listen to the intro part, you would know that she is a yoga teacher herself, and I have joined one of your classes, and I gotta say that was one of the best yoga classes I've had.
Thank you. That's really lovely. I do teach a lot of restorative yin yoga practices, so it's for calming down. And yeah, I do remember when I taught you, and that day we had nice pillows and lots of props. So yeah, I'm glad to hear. That's really good.
Yeah, you're such a good teacher, very accommodating. And I was kind of struggling with a few moves, and then you helped me out as well. So that's how I remembered, that was the best teacher I've had in Hong Kong.
That's really nice of you. Teaching has been something I've been doing for the past 4 years. And I try not to be too woo-woo about it. It's something that when it happens and you decide to teach and you do the course, and it's really stuck nicely. I'll probably delve more into what I was doing beforehand, which is a stark contrast.
Yeah.
Totally different world.
I'm curious. I have no idea what Karina is going to tell us this episode, so let's find out. But without further ado, maybe we can start off with your background so our listeners can get to know you a little bit more. So, Karina, we always start off with this set of questions with every single guest of ours. So, tell us about your background. Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
All right. I'll start with what I'm a mix of. I'm British, Filipino, and Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese. And I was born in Hong Kong and predominantly raised here in Hong Kong. What am I? I guess if we're talking about occupation, I am currently teaching yoga, and I'm also a performing artist.
So wow, you actually grew up in a household with at least 3 cultures, right? That
Yes.
would be British, Filipino American, a bit of Hong Kong Chinese as well. So what was that like growing up for you?
Well, there was definitely something more of a leading culture. So we'll start off with what my parents' mix are. My mom's Filipino American and filtered out over the generations as my great grandmother on my mother's side was half American, half Filipino, 1 out of 11 children. And on my dad's side, he's half Hong Kong Chinese, half British. So, a little bit of Irish too, because my grandfather is half English, half Irish. Oh, I'm even tired saying this right now.
How did you make sense of that growing up as a kid?
Explaining it how I just did right now. I think I just held my breath just to say it as well. It's actually just the way I've explained it just now is usually how I try to say it all under one breath to anyone. I'll just see if anyone's still listening.
Like, whoa.
I'll see if they're still listening. If they're like, yeah, you're this, you're that, whatever. And you're just like, that is
or like they were just looking for that one keyword. Oh, Chinese, or like, whatever that they are trying to like.
Yeah, or they'll just say, well, you just don't look like that. And I was like, oh,
but you are that. Right? It's like, you can't change the fact.
Yeah, I mean, genetics are amazing. It's amazing to see Eurasian faces because of how things can skip along generations. On my grandmother's side, her sisters, so my mom's mom, her sisters, my grand aunts, they have green eyes and light brunette hair. But my grandmother has more like dark greenish eyes, fair skin, dark hair. So it's really interesting. Because they're Eurasian too. Right. Then my dad has dark-ish green eyes, dark hair, British nose, and fair skin. So I would say people who are half-half, you can see a distinct feature or color of eyes or hair. For me, because I'm a daughter of two mixed parents, it's just an extra mix. But then sometimes people just think I'm Korean.
Yes.
Or Japanese.
Yes, they love going for those two. Like I've had like a makeup artist who would ask me every single time I go in, and she would just be like, are you sure you're not Korean? I'm like, I'm pretty sure. It's like Singaporean. Nah. Japanese. Like, no.
It is strange when people say, are you sure?
I know.
I was like, who am I?
It's like, as far as I know, I'm pretty sure. Like, do I need to look back at my family tree?
Yeah. Topic of identity and culture, there's such an interesting conversation for people.
Yeah.
I mean, in the industries I've worked with in the past 10 years, if I start off with the first job I ever had for summer jobs in my late teens, I was assisting in a kindergarten, teaching English. I've always been very animated anyway, so kids not so much don't really mind what you look like as long as you're engaging and interactive. But then some other work, especially teaching English, some kids or parents of the kids might look at you like, are you sure you are from the UK? Because they want a blonde teacher, brunette teacher.
Yeah.
So, that's something in Asia.
Like we've told that story on Proudly Asian as well. It's like basically this like example that happens in Hong Kong at a tutorial center. And basically it's this British Chinese guy and a white European guy who like they were both applying for the same job as an English tutor. One is a native English speaker. The other one is European, so not really native. But then the European guy got the job and it happens in Hong Kong. So it's like... Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's like what the company's trying to represent.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's just limited to cities or Asia particular. It's also about what are the beauty standards or what do people find engaging and attractive in Hong Kong.
For sure.
So as commonly we've seen, probably a lot of people might find Caucasian skin, light hair, light eyes, means better education. I'm just saying that, or it means that it will relate to higher sales, or I don't know, there's a certain appearance and a culture which equates to the success of the work. I'm just saying it in a very metric kind of way because of if I go past the English teaching, I also started to dabble in freelance modeling when I was young, just to earn a little side income. And that was a whole other thing where you go in, you probably do your first shoot for a brand, and you have this moment like, wow, cool. Like I'm being embraced for a unique mixed look. And then suddenly you're told, oh, you're a bit too olive tan skin. Maybe you should whiten your skin more, or you don't really look full Asian, but you also don't really look Western Eurasian enough. And then other Eurasian faces have lighter brown hair or features that are associated with a cosmetic brand or bank or other massive commercial brands. So I think probably joining that industry, I got an idea of what does appearance mean and looks for certain occupations. Yeah.
This is a very like layered conversation, you know. There's that Hong Kong culture where they have a certain expectation about like what a certain people should look like.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to modeling, casting, it must be just like everyone would be telling that, oh, you're not enough, you're not this or that enough as well.
Yeah.
Like, or would you have been told that, oh, can you just say you are this so it's easier to sell?
Oh, yeah.
You know, as a model.
Yeah, they said don't say that you're part Filipino. Just say you're British-Chinese. So when you're younger and you're with an agency, you'll do as they tell you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean more work. It's only because, you know, first impressions when you walk into a casting, they'll only speak a few words to you, but if they just like you, you'll know. And sometimes they don't even want to really ask. You come in, take photos, and you're out, and you know that they probably didn't really like you. But it's so weird for me to say it out loud, but it's
heartbreaking.
It's probably like years of just building a thick skin because my background in also doing theater arts was something you get used to, being different personalities and characters for a show. Because I did a lot of musical theater and pantomimes in Hong Kong. When I decided to try modeling, it was just like, oh, I want to earn a little bit on the side, just get an idea of how that world is like. But it's vastly different from performing arts and theater because theater is about being bold, projecting movement, dance. And then modeling screen work is all about subtleties and actually the face feature speaks for itself. And that's why a lot of people who went into modeling don't really need to have a voice. But nowadays it's different, right? I'm talking about like 2008 time. Now it's different with Instagram and
body positivity movement and all.
I mean, agencies are different now as well because they require the models to have a social media presence. Back when I first started, when I was like 19, you still had to print your photos and put it into a folder and bring that folder.
Like a card
or even like a portfolio. Now the portfolios are probably on an iPad. Yeah.
Or even like they'll look at like how many followers you have.
Yeah, because then they'll think of it as this face will be recognized related to a brand.
Yeah.
Might mean more sales.
It's a completely different ball game now.
Yeah, and it's tiring.
It sounds tiring.
I mean, I briefly mentioned to you that I'm semi-retired because I thought it was all over when I stopped for 4 years when I went to live in Singapore. And I was working in show production. My heart has always been around producing shows and the music industry and curating seamless performances of like dance with DJ gigs. So that's what I did when I was living in Singapore. And any of the other stuff that I did, like creativity, I put behind because I stepped into a producer role. So when I got back to Hong Kong, because pandemic, I had to start all over again. And I thought, okay, let's look at my skills. Let's look at what is valuable right now in terms of careers. Because as you know, there were so many careers that were deemed non-essential during the pandemic. And a lot of what I worked in was a creative industry or a show industry. So with modeling, I remember someone in the industry, maybe a client, a videographer, was like, hey, you're back in Hong Kong, free to do this upcoming job for vacuum cleaner. And I was like, all right, maybe I'll do it. I'll still see if I've got it. And I ended up carving out into a little more of a lifestyle kind of mummy role. So now I'm casted as a young mom. Okay. Or I'm vacuuming or I'm doing yoga.
Oh my God.
But I never, it feels very different now as well because when I was younger, it excites you. You see a photo on a billboard or a commercial ad or a picture. Now you're like, oh yeah, good job. Glad I earned a little extra, but it's less attachment to it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can imagine this industry, there must be a lot of like putting yourself in boxes, in labels, like complying with stereotypes, which is not really completely aligned, especially with people who have mixed, I mean, just any people, I would say, but then even more so for people with like mixed cultures, mixed identities, right?
Yeah. I mean, we as mixed Eurasian people, I think there's a sense of having to be really multilingual, having to be able to understand Asian culture of the country you're living in, as well as your values that you were raised with, whether it's a grandparent who raised you or a parent. And when you have to go to family dinners, parties, weddings, funerals, we've been to
all sorts of cultures you have to comply with.
Yeah, you just you learn through observing growing up a lot of the time. At home, I didn't really grow up with Chinese culture. At most, we just love going for yum cha every weekend for one of our family Sundays. But I grew up a lot with Filipino American and British culture. Mostly English spoken at home, and then my mom would mix up Tagalog and English. So even when I went to Philippines and I try to speak a bit of, even people will laugh if they know Tagalog, they're going to be like, oh, she's so slang. I think you're supposed to say Tagalog or something. They'll be like, oh, you're so cute, your accent, you know. Well, you're also height. So when I go there, I stand out.
Right.
They feel like you're really tall and you look different with the facial features. So they also like, oh, you're Eurasian. You're foreign here. I mean, the most common thing I always had when I went back for summer, Christmas in Manila, they're like, oh, you should apply for Miss Philippines. You're getting older. It's your time now. I think you can make it to a show business naman. And you're like, I just want to have my, I'm just going to eat my adobo now, and just like chill out and stuff, So when you're mixed, they see it as like showbiz.
Like an advantage for them, right? Yeah.
Well, they think that it's like opportunity by joining a pageant. I mean, it's actually a pretty grand pageant. I love watching how people get so excited watching.
They're also pretty, but I think it's interesting. A lot of them are also mixed Filipinos, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very tall as well. I mean, something about Filipino culture that I've always valued is there's a strong inclination and belief in how important education is. As you know, of any socioeconomic class, everybody believes, and it's about getting through university so that you have opportunity in your career for yourself and your family. So that's something that was definitely drilled in from a young age at home. So I grew up in a very strict Catholic household, actually, and I had to study. In terms of sports, I was doing a lot of competitive swimming. I didn't do so well with ball sports. Like I wasn't really great at basketball or couldn't, definitely not rugby. So yeah, that was something that I got into. And British culture was more my dad because he went to boarding school and university in the UK. And having said that, in just the few words I've said just now has probably pointed at slight privilege. But the thing is, like, everyone has very different paths of what's happened. And due to family situation, I wasn't actually able to get a chance to go to university. And that's why I had mentioned I had started working and teaching already about summers during my teens. So I would say from learning about Filipino or Asian values, I've been working hard a long time.
Wow.
And I think in a way, fast forward to pandemic was the first time where I was literally stopped in my tracks to think about what it is that I would like to do. Yeah. I started going to yoga while I was working on show production in Singapore. But I never thought in my mind that I would do the course, the training, and teach. It was just I couldn't sleep because we did shows that would start at 1 a.m, finish by 3 a.m, and then help out with security to bring the artist back to accommodation, and then finish my day 5 a.m. Yeah, and I'd be back in the office probably 11 a.m. to do all the admin as well.
Wow. So when did you know that you wanted to do yoga for sure, like as a job?
I definitely wanted to do the course, but not to become a teacher. I thought everybody talks about you either become a teacher or you just deepen your practice. So I actually juggled doing the yoga teacher training while I was juggling this full-time job, which I highly do not recommend you ever do. In Hong Kong, I find that some people do their teacher trainings, they do it every weekend, and then the course lasts 3 to 6 months. So I did something like that where I did a 3-month course, and then I did it Saturdays, Sundays, 8 a.m. starts, finish like 4 p.m. But it was pretty horrendous. I was getting to bed by 5 a.m. and waking up at 7.
Oh dear.
And my teacher trainer was strict with me. She knew what industry I worked in, but she was like, you work hard. And I was like, Wow. But strangely, the last month of that course, everything went into restrictions when I was in Singapore. So I got to experience what it was like as everyone transitioned into online learning. And I even did my exam online. And then, unfortunately, I was retrenched the day before my exam. Yeah. And I had a month to get back to Hong Kong. So, but it is what it is.
Wow.
And now when I think about it, I'm like, okay, it was meant to be. All of it was meant to be.
All the tests to make sure that you're serious about this.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Anyone who talks about career transition, they try to overlap to smooth out your transition. Nobody wants to suddenly have carpet rug pull underneath you, and then you've got to dive into the unknown. But that is what happened. And when I got back to Hong Kong in 2020, things were not completely closed yet. It was quite refreshing to come back here. And I'm like, you know what, this is okay. Because when I was in Singapore, you couldn't even walk in the street with someone. They had this rule where it was solo travel and you had to check in with a QR code. But then things did close all over again in June, July 2020 here.
Yeah.
Yes, I was teaching and practicing with friends in parks. And I was mentioning to you that I was working with an NGO called IYKYK, teaching well-being and yoga classes to domestic helpers who also learn courses through them for financial literacy, law, and all other skills. I believe you mentioned to me that you've also taught with them too.
Yes. I did one class where I taught filming and making videos, like the basics of filming. Yeah.
Cool. That's really nice. I think it has to come from the heart, and it's really special when you're sharing and imparting your knowledge. So I had a really cathartic moment when I was teaching at this NGO, and I realized I think I've fallen into teaching.
Yeah.
But then actually, wait a sec, nothing's really ever by accident. And I figured okay, this is where I'm meant to be right now.
It's like it's all making sense to you.
Yeah. So if I bring that back to culture, I would say that as a child and a teenager, there's this strong sense of giving your best attitude and always working very hard. So I think that naturally was instilled in any work I've done in the past few years. And with Chinese culture, I was really surrounded by it just being in Hong Kong. But because I wasn't raised speaking Cantonese, even though my dad is a Cantonese speaker and he's in law, I've actually been one of the old court cases where you're allowed to have like a public viewing. I remember being 15 and experiencing one of his court cases. It was like a traffic one. And he did the whole thing in Cantonese. And I was like, whoa, it's like watching a completely different person. I usually grab context of things as well. And I have a lot of performer dance local friends who I go to their dance classes in Cantonese and I just pick up on the repetitive phrases and words. But that's how I've always just picked up languages, immersing myself. I lived in Beijing for a year as well. And when you're assimilated and immersed, you have to speak the language.
Yeah.
So in primary and secondary school, I mainly learned Mandarin. Yeah.
You know, like growing up, have you ever had that feeling where you wish you knew, you know, either one of the cultures better? You know, like you said, you're not very much knowledgeable about, you know, the Chinese side. Have you ever felt like, oh, you wanted to know more about that side?
Not really. I just feel like I'm completely surrounded by it.
Because you grew up in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah. Also, I'm also an only child. So growing up, you're around a lot of adults, all types of personalities, and you've always got to entertain yourself. So you're watching and listening to everything all the time. So, you know, friends, if you join their gatherings or experience their Chinese New Year celebrations, which I've done, it's just really interesting. I think what I love about Asian culture are the traditions, ceremonies, rituals.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I want to look at the other aspect to, you know, like growing up as a mixed race kid in Hong Kong, because I can imagine you must get like biased questions from all sides of this cultural equation. And do you ever get the assumption, let's say from your Asian or Chinese friends in Hong Kong or Singapore, just because you're Eurasian, that they imagine things must be easier, much better for you because of that whole context of like, you know, white privilege still, you know, it's still a thing in Asia. Not very much in East Asia, I think, right now, but more like in Southeast Asia. But then would they say, oh, you're half white, things must be easier for you? And is it true for you?
I feel like not everyone says that explicitly, but they definitely imply it. I don't know if I've really experienced, I'm trying to imagine a memory of maybe it's because I just don't look obviously white or West or Caucasian, because that's commonly a thing where opposite actually, I've always felt people would say that you don't really look Western, Karina. You don't really look, are you sure you're part British? Or is that just like, because you know how in Hong Kong you can have people who are British by citizenship, but are ethnically full Chinese. So sometimes you get people questioning and saying, are you just saying that because it's like by citizenship? You know, are you really? And it's like, yes. I mean, my surname is very Irish, Australian, like Irish, British. So in terms of privilege of, I haven't really commonly received that actually. Maybe what it is my exposure to being raised quite Western as well, is knowing how to speak to Western people in social situations. Because a lot of it is dry humor, a bit of sarcasm. It's reading different personalities, and it's all about communication and nuances, social cues.
Yeah.
So perhaps in that sense, what I feel is that sometimes Asian people who are not raised around Western cultures have a very different way to bond, whether it's in the workplace or socially. And then if you see how maybe a mixed person can just seamlessly blend and laugh and create a warm environment with different people of different cultures, maybe it elicits a little bit of comparison, slight envy. But that's to do with communication styles.
It's code switching, right? Basically, it's like when you are either, you know, ethnically a mixed race kid, or like you grew up between cultures, or like you grew up elsewhere, not in Asia. I think for a lot of those Asian kids, they would have this superpower, you know, like code switching, and they can blend into different communication styles, patterns, accents, or even languages if they're like multilingual, right?
Yeah. Well, speaking of multilingual, I've been speaking a lot about the distinct aspects of Western, Asian, but then let's enter the Eurasian sphere of things.
Oh dear.
With me with my voiceover voice. From with Eurasians, there's definitely competitive streak because Eurasians do know that they are quite exotic, and if they're raised with 2 languages at home, they know the advantages it has in terms of work opportunity, fitting in culturally, and it's just very natural to them, especially if some of them started off in local school in primary and then shifted over to an international school in secondary, which is quite common. A couple of my Eurasian girlfriends had that educational experience. And they definitely have a very interesting experience of life where they're very accepted, praised, and really well liked because it's very impressive. So what happens is it becomes a bit competitive of like which Eurasians know the most languages. And
so between Eurasians, they would also have this competition of like who's a better Eurasian.
Yeah, probably like, yeah, like who can speak the most, who's like a grade student. And there's this, I mean, we were talking about beauty pageants, you know, you get them joining beauty pageants or different occupations, and they naturally stand out, and I guess they're the best of the different worlds, best of both worlds and stuff.
Yeah.
If I bring that back to modeling, that's a whole other thing too. Modeling or even entertainment, acting industry. You put a whole bunch of Eurasian mixed people into one place. It's definitely a beautiful room to be in, but people might look so similar, or like who stands out the most. So that's quite interesting when I've gone to a casting and there's just so many Eurasian faces there.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm definitely not going to get this gig because we all look the same, but not.
Would you say that competitive side is probably the Asian side?
Probably. Yeah. I'm pretty sure if it's a Eurasian person who has a Asian mother, then for sure they probably were doing piano lessons and all types of sports and stuff. And then the Western side is more of the jokey side or posh side, especially the father side is British. I don't know. Is it a genetic thing as well? Would we say that Eurasians can like absorb different languages? Probably because they're traveling summer and Christmases to different countries. Yeah. So they get such exposure to different places at such a young age.
Yeah.
I mean, we probably have seen quite a few different mixed personalities and influencers in Hong Kong who really show off their skills in Cantonese, Mandarin, French, German, and people love that.
I know.
You know, it's such a thing, and they're just talking and speaking different languages, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, the locals really love it when like an obviously like Guai Mui looking person speaks Cantonese, and then they love that whole interaction. It's like, you speak Canto.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's like, you sure you speak Canto? You know, that whole exchange.
Yeah.
As opposed to like someone coming in and it's like, I don't really speak. And then they would have that look of like disgust. It's like, I'm disappointed at you.
Well, you probably know some pretty famous or celebrity models that didn't even have to learn to speak Cantonese. There was a time years ago where there was that trend. Was it called the Langmo? It was like the models that were like calendar girls. It was like a huge thing, like conventions where it was like these models that became big because they were like bridal faces or calendar faces. And then the Hong Kong Convention Center, or they're in books or something. And these models didn't have, who become later actresses as a result of becoming so famous, don't have to learn to speak Cantonese, probably because their manager has helped them out a lot with their publicity. But some talent you're required to pick up the Cantonese really fast, or the country that you're in, because if they want to put you in press and get you into celebrity status really fast, that's the way to do it. But it wasn't for me. I was very, very particular that I'm coming in to do the job, and I don't want to be famous.
Oh, wow.
I was very particular about that. But that's something I saw. Because there was the age that I started getting into modeling, I met a huge network of people really quickly. And actually fast forward to today, some of these girls that I went to castings with or crossed paths with are quite famous now. And it's really cool to see like, that's the path they chose and that's how they got there. Yeah.
Wow.
But that's how they use their culture, their look, and then it becomes like a marketing thing too.
Yeah, they have to be very strategic about it, right?
And if you have a manager as well.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious, before we started the recording, we talked a little bit about, surviving as a mixed culture kid. And then, earlier we also talked about code switching. I just want to know, what's your personal experience with that? Because you worked in Hong Kong, in Singapore as well. Yeah. And a lot of times we know that for these third culture kids, mixed race kids, and also Asian diasporas or immigrant children or everything in between, that whole concept of code switching is basically how they cope with any social situations, wherever they go. And I love to say how for this type of Asians, they don't fit in anywhere, but they also fit in everywhere because they know how to code switch. Yes.
I do know friends like this who are performers and also non-performers, just bilingual, very talented, and they're very charismatic. They just know how to lead a room and a social circle of people. And it's really cool to be friends with people like that and to just listen in on it. Yeah. Me, I think what I do is I lessen my English accent. And I guess when I was in Singapore, I simplified my use of words. I wouldn't be able to talk like how I'm talking to you right now. I guess I would kind of just go like this, like that. Or
would you kind of also do that Singaporean accent whenever you're around a lot of them?
Yeah, it's very sing-song. You have to go they're like, I'm trying to remember. I haven't been in Singapore for so long. They always go like this, like wala, xia. It's like xia at the end of every single sentence. They reverse their words so that it's almost like speaking like Yoda, but not really.
Oh wow. Interesting.
This one over there. Oh my God, I don't want to even imitate that.
No, we're definitely not making fun of the accents.
I don't want my Singaporean friends to be like, Karina, what is this?
It's like you need to work on that. You really haven't been with your friends.
But you know what I mean? It's like I'm trying to remember how I was saying this before, and I was like, it's because I'm not there right now.
Exactly.
But when you're there, you just do it.
It comes back to you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, let's say when you're in the taxis in Hong Kong, I can't say, I'd like to go to Landmark, please. You just go I'd like to go to Landmark.
It's like Landmark.
You try to add it like, if I don't know the Chinese Cantonese place that I want to go to, I'll shamefully have to try and say the English in a sing-song accent, and hopefully they'll get it, but most likely they won't. So it'll probably be like, say Lyndhurst. Can I go to Lyndhurst Terrace? Yeah. Lyndhurst Terrace. And it's not even the Cantonese word, and then obviously, my bad, I'm taken somewhere else. So what I do now, sometimes if I don't know the Cantonese word, I get the Chinese character and I show it.
Yes. Yeah. I would normally have that pulled up on the phone just in case.
Yeah.
But then I get you every time. I mean, even I have that experience working in Hong Kong as well, because back then when I was in TV news, I worked at this TV station, and actually all of the video editors are locals, and they don't speak much English. And so whenever I go up to them, because I had to work with them to edit my packages or look up for footage, right? So I would not speak to them in this voice because I've done that before, and they got really annoyed. They thought I was trying to intimidate them or try to boss them around. So later on, I learned, I try to speak like them. I was like, okay, let me try that now. I was like, hey, hello. Give me some Trump today, because I was working on a Donald Trump package back then.
Oh my God.
Yes. And then they were like, oh, Trump. Yes.
Oh my God. And then you're cringing on the inside.
I know. But it's they call them Trump not because they liked him, not because it was an endearing way to call him. But then, locals, they just like to double up some terms nicknames. Or words. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Philippines, people's names aren't even their actual names on.
I heard.
You get people who are like bong bong.
Yes.
Or like one of my aunts is called Mickey for short, and her actual name's Margarita. So, people, I don't know what it is because
Did you have one growing up?
No, luckily I was always just called Karina, thankfully. But sometimes they also link people's names, like the first two letters, because Filipino names are very long. So like my full name is Karina Maria Rivera Curlewis.
Wow.
So sometimes people just connect the two first letters of each name and then create a nickname. But that's definitely something over there. Like someone's name is not actually their real name.
I heard, yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. But I mean, like, I don't know if you agree with this, but I guess like from my experience, like during like code switching in Asia specifically, what I realized was that like people normally don't realize that we are code switching.
Yes.
Because like whenever you enter a room, you quickly read, this is the crowd that I'm with. So I will tweak my accent or tweak my communication pattern in this way so it fits in better.
Yeah.
And normally people would just like take it from face value as in like, oh, that's just who you are.
Yeah.
If you act super Chinese, oh yeah, then you're Chinese. If you act super Western, then oh yeah, she's like a foreigner.
Well, you mean like if you have a British accent? I mean, when I'm around British friends or if I'm in the UK, I feel like they wouldn't understand me if I spoke like this. I'd say the accent I'm working with right now is just a relaxed. People say it sounds very transatlantic or Canadian or sometimes Australian, which is weird.
In Hong Kong, they call it international. Right?
International. But when I go to the UK or I'm around British friends, it will suddenly change and I'll start speaking like this all the time. So maybe I should just speak the rest of this episode in this accent. And who am I?
Yeah.
I'm just being very
It's a different
pompous.
guess now.
Yeah.
It's like, is it still Karina?
But it is what it is.
Yeah.
You just feel like you will be understood if you speak in the accent in the country that you're in. But then if you're in certain parts of Asia, they don't understand the vowels, the consonants.
The funny thing is like, it's not like they don't even understand the words. They just don't know how to respond to that. It's just not a sound that's familiar to them.
Exactly. So then it's, if you simplify it, then you have to just say, over there,
Yes.
water.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
It's like, I go eat lunch now.
Sick. Okay. Hola. Okay. Bye-bye.
It's like, like the other day I was chatting with my friends. They're Asian Americans, so they work in Hong Kong. And we always talk about how shocking it is, like interacting with some local colleagues, because the first thing that they would say to you sometimes, I mean, they don't even think about, you got fat, you got skinnier. But actually one of our other friends said, gave us this insight, which is like in Cantonese or in Asian, maybe in Chinese language, how are you does not exist. So the fact that they say, oh, you got fat or you got skinnier is their way of saying, how are you?
Yes, it's their obvious observation as a way to start a conversation, but that's just a sure way to end one.
Yeah. I know. Because like in Cantonese, I guess like, okay, if someone asks like in Cantonese, oh, like Dima, how are you?
Yeah.
Then how do you even answer that?
Maybe you're supposed to just say I'm good. Or like, oh, so tired. It's like, how do you say tired? It's like,
hold tight.
yeah, like because everyone mixes Cantonese with English and stuff.
Hold tired.
Was it hogui? Like so tired.
Yeah.
So, but that's a Asian culture bonding way. I say Hong Kong Chinese bonding way is to complain.
Yeah.
To say how tired you are. And then someone else is like, no, you're tired? I'm tired.
Oh, gosh. Tell me about it.
But then it's a bonding thing,
Yeah.
If you want to talk about like, hey, let's go to yoga together. Let's do this. Oh, no, I'm so tired. You need to bond in a collective complaint.
Yeah.
That's just common, I would say.
You.
But if you genuinely start expanding on your answer and be like, well, I was feeling my feelings today. And they're just like, this person's weird.
I know. You can't just go in and be like, oh, I've just worked 10 hours and then I did this, did that, so I'm really tired. Like, all you need to tell them is just like, tired, sleepy.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, when I worked in offices for events work, and I did find that I wasn't savvy enough to know how office culture worked. So I definitely got into some awkward social situations where I did not fit in. But years later, when I learned from those experiences, I realized it's definitely about finding that collective agreement, what everyone likes, and you feel that together and then go eat. And back in the day when I was really unhealthy and I used to smoke cigarettes, that was a way to bond as well. You know, your chance to get out of the office is to go for a cigarette break.
Yeah, that's where you get all the tea and gossips, right?
Yeah. But it's also like so bad because you might not actually really want to smoke, but you're doing it because it's
you don't want to miss out.
It's good to also step out of the office instead of being in there the whole time. So that's something I noticed as well culturally.
For sure.
But back to code switching. I'm trying to remember what other times where I've code switched. I think it's a constant thing of when I'm working with different people, whether it's in a show environment or entertainment, or I would say in the yoga space, it's a bit more wide. So people are joining because they can collectively all talk about the physical practice. But you won't necessarily get all people talking about the philosophy of it. That's more of the academics who love yogic sciences, who can really go in depth about that. But other groups, companies, and things I have found culturally in Asia is I would say food.
Oh, yes.
Food bonds everyone together.
Yes, good food for sure.
Yeah, and discounts. Yeah. Asia is all about discounts.
Yeah.
If you find the discounts, you're in.
I know.
You're being like,
and if you're the discounts person, like where people go to.
Yeah. Oh, I got this app. The
most popular person in town, everyone.
It's like 20% off at 2 p.m. Let's go.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like the whole code switching thing, I feel like it's more or less like a if you know thing. Like a different third culture kid, if you're doing that, or like someone else who knows this whole thing will see you doing that. But then for those who never really left Asia or never really saw, you know, the whole spectrum of like cultures and all, they might not know there are different sides to you. So this is why it's like, for example, like personally, when I've code switch so well that I fit in a certain room and they might kind of like forget I have different sides, like I have different cultural identities, and they would start expecting me to know 100% of like what they're on about, you know, their culture or like that unspoken rules. But then sometimes I do stick out because I genuinely don't know the unspoken rules that they expect me to know. And that's when they'll look at me funny. They're like, why are you like that?
You're like, you're not one of us.
Exactly. Like they would expect me to comply with that so much that when maybe that one time I don't, they would see me as this like troublemaker. I don't know if you've had that experience.
So there's an interesting moment where I was working with another Eurasian in a performing space, and she's fluent in Cantonese and she's got a very British accent. And I think I was trying my best with a little bit of sprinkling of Cantonese to bond with my co-performers. And she just looked at me and rolled her eyes because she's really pro at Cantonese, and she saw what I guess I was code switching, right? And I was doing it in a very lame, cringy way.
Okay. So was she offended because you thought she didn't speak, or?
I think she was offended because she knew exactly what I was trying to do is to connect. And it was just, she's fluent in Cantonese and she's just like side-eyeing. And that's what I mean, where if someone knows what you're doing in code switching and is also Eurasian and they're just more proficient in a language than you are, then it is a very cringy moment. And I've had a lot of that. I've had a lot of moments where maybe a Eurasian person or an Asian person is looking at me side-eye and you're like, you're lame. And I'm just like, oh, well, this is life. We'll just get on with it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, because then the person who actually speaks the more fluent side of things can get their point across, and they're not really trying. They're just communicating properly with people. Yeah, but I'm so used to it, actually, where you just have to have enough, I wouldn't even say self-confidence. You just got to roll with the punches.
Yeah. It's just like sometimes, like different Asians, they might judge like whether or not you are a good Asian based on your language and your accents, right? It's like, oh, like I think, like certain cultures could be like completely addicted to this concept. As in, like, I know definitely some of my Korean American friends who don't speak Korean, there would be Koreans from Korea who would be like, you're definitely not Korean.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't speak Korean, then you're not Korean.
Yeah.
Like, they would even get hate for not speaking the language.
Oh.
Yeah. So, like, I sometimes don't really quite understand why, like, among Asians.
I've definitely been called a fake Filipino.
Oh, dear. By Filipinos or?
Yeah, in like a sarcastic way. It's like, oh, you're a fake Filipino. You're just, you're born, raised in Hong Kong. You never lived in the Philippines. And I was like, well, I went every summer and Christmas. So genetically I am. But oh, well, like if that's what you think, that's what you think. But you just get so used to people always poking at you all the time what you are. And you, after a while and as you get older, you care less.
True.
It's just, end of the day, when you travel, it's about trying to understand different cultures and belief systems and respecting, ultimately. I would say the thing that I find myself in is sometimes if I'm surrounded by a lot of Westerners who don't know Asian values and haven't grown up in Hong Kong, is how Asian culture is about subtlety. It's not very blatant or brash. So you have to read between the lines about what not to say and politeness. Our culture, the Asian culture, is very polite.
So reading the air, or
it's polite, but it's also very insulting. I mean, it's very like, wow, you sow this, you sow that. I feel bad even just saying skin color or anything. It gets away with being so in your face. Probably because when they say it in Mandarin or Cantonese, it's just such a harsh language.
They really go for the appearance. Yeah. Which normally is like something that people will get in trouble for in the West.
Yes. So I find if you are in a community or an environment where it's predominantly, you could be in a very British environment, and their culture will quite disregard other Asian culture and will insert themselves into discussions or command someone what to do. And because it's that absolute thick lack of awareness or care for a social situation that it's just so like, whoa, did that person just say that? Did they just command someone like that? And then sometimes an Asian person is just so taken aback. They just do as they're told. That's what I notice sometimes in the Western side of things, where if they didn't grow up with an Asian culture, they disregard completely. They really take charge in that sense.
As opposed to like third culture kids or like mixed race kids, they have the awareness on both sides. So I feel like it's like we're always living in this confusion of like, should I go more Western? Should I go more Asian? And then we're really like not 100% on either side.
Recently, I went to like a wellness day at a hotel spa because they had a community yoga class. So I went and I noticed a lot of the staff there were Filipino and very good English. But I noticed that when I asked for help on certain things, they first came off quite harsh. And I thought to myself, like, gosh, I think they're probably so used to dealing with customers or so in their face, like, do this for me, do this, do that. But with the moment I asked nicely and politely, they just warmed up. Because as you know, Filipino cultures are very accommodating. They're most of the people that are in service industries in Hong Kong, hospitality as well. And they love to provide a very good customer experience. And I noticed that straight away, how they really felt nice that I was asking them nicely. But that's just something I know about the culture. You just don't command someone like... So I just thought, oh, okay, they're probably just used to dealing with really harsh communication all the time from the customers that come through there.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because like sometimes, you know, like me looking like all Chinese, like I think there are definitely like service workers who would like, when they see me coming through the door, they're like, oh yeah, that's another difficult Chinese customer. But then I'm just like, no, I'm here for you. Like I'm all about like that whole respectful, or like they might expect me to be racist against them. But then I think that is like, I don't know, like if I would call it that reverse discrimination or reverse racism, where they would expect me to just discriminate against them.
Like walk in thinking you're above them and be like, where's my table?
Exactly. Yeah. So I just feel like, I think there's that whole like challenge of like either for people like yourself or like people who maybe are completely Asian but then who grew up elsewhere. Like people are not able to tell from their accent or from the appearance that is this person going to be racist against me. So that whole like going back to that whole code switching, you know, that whole ability of being able to navigate between this whole cultural spectrum, you know, fit in anywhere, like it's so not visible and it's very underrated as well.
That's something that comes with being non-identifiable to one particular culture.
For sure.
Before I've even opened my mouth, people give me a funny look. And then when I start speaking, I see how their eyes change completely. Yeah. It's very annoying, but it is what it is. But I see it all the time.
Yes, for sure. And I also know that like before we started this recording, you also mentioned a little bit about, you know, like people in Asia might expect you to be quite Western. But then when you travel to North America, that's when you kind of felt like, oh, yeah, actually, like your Asian side was sort of amplified as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I was mentioning to you about how the first time I ever went to New York a few years ago for a wedding, my cousin who came down from Toronto to meet me there as well, who's more relaxed and Canadian, we were down at the train and I was trying to figure out how to use the ticket machine. And she decided to ask a stranger for help. And she's like, hey, how do we use this? And then the person helped us. And she's like, thanks, hun. And I was like, oh my God, why are you talking to this person? He's a stranger. We must not talk to strangers. Stranger, danger. And then she was just like, but he's just so nice. He helped us. And I was like, no. And then I had this moment when I was on the train. I was like, oh my God, this is the scariest train I've ever been on. And I was like, welcome to New York. And I thought, oh my God, I love Asia. I was like, I had that moment. I was like, I am so much more Asian than I ever thought I was.
I get you.
Because I was like, I don't like strangers talking to me. But it's different in Hong Kong social. Because as you know, if you go out in Hong Kong, people are so friendly.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to just talk to anybody on a night out. Or if you're at a concert, festival.
Yeah.
It's different. But then when you're out in the city, transport, and also because in countries like the US or Canada where people rely on tips, they need to start conversation with you and have charm and really fun banter.
Yeah, it's like all of them are like, they are all extroverts in some way.
Yeah, and that whenever I have to go to these countries, I don't get culture shock, but I get a little bit of a moment where I have to adjust. It's a funny story, my New York story. I accidentally had a bit of a small injury in my big toe. And I really didn't want to miss this wedding. So I was limping. And my cousin thought it was a really funny idea to put me in a wheelchair when we went to the Museum of Modern Art. So my first time in the MoMA, I experienced in a wheelchair. And I highly don't recommend doing it because it's very slow to be pushed in a wheelchair around that museum. And she spent so long in the Van Gogh section. And I was like, I'm so bored. I mean, I love art, but I was like, this is not fun.
And did you receive any like special attention along the way?
People were just kind of side-eyeing me. And I just felt like I'm having a very strange experience of New York right now. I'm nervous and I'm like, I want to go back to Asia. Take me to Chinatown right now. Give me Asian food.
Yeah, I can tell like sometimes when you're like so used to living in Asia, it could be intimidating or like overwhelming, like just energetically, like when you go out there. Yeah.
I mean, well, now I'm much more equipped for New York. I'm ready. I'm ready for you, New York. I'll be back.
Yes. New York, be ready.
But I'm sorry, I'm still not going to talk to strangers, though. It's not my thing. It's like I'll have to do the cold thing where it's like someone helps me with the ticket machine. I'm like, Sheshe. I have sometimes spoken other languages just to avoid speaking to people.
Just to get away from the situation.
Yeah. Me no speak no English. Low understand. No, low.
Oh, dear.
Low like.
Wow.
Oh, mo. Or sometimes I've just put on really weird accents just to get people to get away. But I don't go out anymore. But this is when I worked in nightlife and entertainment. So you're always getting people like, hey, can I get you a drink? Or, hey, what's up? And I'm like,
and that's when they lose interest instantly, right? Or
they're just like, all right. And then I'll be like, oh, thank God.
Ooh, that's a superpower. Yeah.
But that's just me. I used to be quite like, I put on the weird on purpose. And a lot of my girlfriends have so many funny stories from those days. But now I'm like protecting society from the weird. So I don't go out. I'm up in the morning and I'm teaching yoga. So I'm channeling all that into like peace.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I really love, like hearing all about your stories here and there, everywhere in the world. But now it's time for us to move on to the next segment,
yes,
which is called
Rapid Fires.
And in this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some points in life, and also some common biased questions that Asians or Eurasians get asked a lot, or you got asked personally, Karina. So are you ready to revisit all these questions?
Yes, I am ready.
All right, let's go. First question. Karina, how did you learn to speak English so well?
Most definitely through Sesame Street. I mean, if you don't know Big Bird, what kind of English do you know?
I know. And second question. You have an interesting shaped nose for an Asian. How is it like that?
Well, my dad has a really big British noggin, so I guess I got it from my dad. I was born that way.
Oh my God, I can't believe people actually ask that, like looking at.
I've had spa therapists who, if they're giving me a massage or facial, to casting people like, wow, this nose is so unique. Where'd you get it? And I was like, well, I would love to say that I bought it somewhere, but actually, no, this is just it grew that way.
Oh dear. All right. And the third question is, how can you be British, Filipino American, and Chinese? You don't look that Western, but also not really that Asian.
But I just am.
Yes. And moving on. Yeah, there's no better way to, like, no explanation.
You can tell I've been asked this my whole life. It's like,
listen to this podcast. And next question. Your accent is cute. Where did you get it? Why do people keep thinking that you can just get what you have?
If you're talking about this accent, I got it maybe around 2 hours ago. But if you're thinking about this accent, I probably picked that up in school. And if you're thinking, well, I'm talking like this, I probably had too many tequila, But and then as for this one, this is just me on a relaxed day. So I got this just from how I am.
Nice. I love it. Yeah. And the last question, Karina. You don't look as mixed as other Eurasians. Are you sure you're Eurasian?
Are you sure that you have a functioning brain and a mouth right now? Get back to me when you know the answer to that, and I'll let you know or not.
And there you go. That's rapid fires for this episode. And for us to close out the episode, Karina, for those who would like to follow your work or even just go to your classes, where can they find you?
You can find me in karinacurlewis.com. Mostly my yoga, movement, performing work is there. I teach with a yoga studio called IYKYK Wellness Studio. They have a studio in Central, Causeway Bay, and newly Chimsachoy. So just check out ikigai.hk if you're curious about some classes. Thank you so much.
Yay! Whenever you in Hong Kong, definitely check out the classes. And if you're visiting Hong Kong, it will also be nice to drop in and say hi to Karina.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
For us to leave this episode, Karina, I just have one last question for you. To you, what does it mean to be proudly Asian?
To me, what does it mean to be proudly Asian? Oh, I feel like I'm fulfilling my dreams of being in a pageant right now. Answering this question.
It's like you have 30 seconds.
To be proudly Asian is to be disciplined, to be hungry, and also to be family oriented.
I love that response.
So Asian, isn't it?
Simple, but to the point.
Yes, it's very Asian, isn't it? Yes.
But that's proudly Asian.
Exactly.
Yeah. There you go. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your story with us on this episode, Karina. I really loved our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. This is quite the experience, and at times feeling awkward, but funny as well.
We survived.
Yeah. Let's have some water now.
Yes, please. And some AC probably.
Yes.
Oh, and
some Palo
we brought
Santo.
our own scent.
Palo
Okay.
Santo.
Yes.
Okay.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.